Anne Parish, and welcome to this week's Quick Things, which is a special version of Quick Things in that it won't just be me talking. We have a guest, and I'll get to Sister Judy Kramer in a moment. But first, just a couple reminders. So we have our NCIS middle school service week going on now. So we want to pray or remember to pray for those kids who are part of that this week. And then we have our golf outing coming up on August 27th, which seemed like a ways away. But the deadline to sign up for the golf outing is this Friday. So get out the clubs, be ready for a great day of golf. We'll have a nice dinner together. So to have some fun and to spend some time with other members of the parish. There are details with the email in which you found this video, or many of you have found this video, and as well as at statanneswausau.org. Other news things are in the email or at the website. So Sister Judy Kramer is one of my favorite people in the church, and so it's great that we could welcome her today. She is a Benedictine, was part of the wonderful Benedictine community of St. Bede Monastery in Eau Claire for so many years. And how many years ago, Sister Judy, did you all move to St. Joe's?
It's about 11 years.
11 years.
Only I came just 5 years ago. I stayed behind to give away our library and our pianos. And
a beautiful facility out south of Eau Claire. And the sisters, the community was dwindling and realized, hey, and that's the hard thing to do, is to realize to make the move that they did and move to St. Joseph, Minnesota, and the Benedictine community there, which I've had some connection with, mainly through all of you. I don't know any of the sisters there other than all of you, but I've had some time to spend at St. John's and at St. Ben's as well. So Sister Judy is here to talk about a recent experience that she's had at the border of the United States and Mexico. The image you saw leading into this YouTube or to this conversation was an image of the border in Arizona. I went to the border at Douglas, Arizona in 2017. And so that picture was from there, but I was only there for a few days. Sister Judy, you were there for a month, 2 months?
I was a month now in Laredo, and then I was a month in El Paso in December of 2018. And it was different. In 2018, I was alone, from my community, but there were many sisters from other communities. And this time in Laredo, there were 3 other sisters from the community here at St. Ben's with me, which makes it a little different.
I bet. Well, I would hope positively, but we can talk about that a little bit. Tell us, first of all, why did you go there, to Laredo or to El Paso?
Well, to start with, I am bilingual. I speak Spanish. I spent 7 years in Antofagasta, Chile. That was way back in the 70s. And so whenever anything comes up with Spanish speaking, I kind of get this sideways glance from everybody in my community. So what has happened with the great explosion of people? Now, this has been going on. The immigration of peoples has been going on for many years. And sad to say, it's going to continue to go on for many years. But there was a real rush again in the fall of this year, and Catholic Charities was put in charge. When I was in Laredo in 2018, the leadership of Women's Communities of Religious was in charge. And they contacted all the communities and said, hey, do you have anybody who would be willing to go down and volunteer in these places? And nobody else went. So I went at that time. Well, part of it is very personal. Darling, I am growing old, and I do speak Spanish, and somehow there's an impulse. What is it in you? What is it in me that can further the mission of Christ today? Things are tough. Things don't look good any place. And somehow I try and you try to be positive. And I think that's what the Lord calls us to do. Last Sunday, the week before, he's shared the bread and he gave it to the people and they picked up the leftovers. Sometimes I think I'm the leftovers in the basket, but there's something we can do. That's what I convinced myself. And I always tell people, you have to ask yourself a question before you launch on something like this. What can I do? What could I do? What should I do? okay, then what will I do?
Yeah.
And you have to kind of talk about the people you live with, your family, your physical condition, what is the situation? And I've just always find, well, then what can I do? What will I do? So that's why I moved on. This time in 2021, it was Catholic Charities. And I was pleased that the president of Catholic Charities is a woman, a Dominican sister, Donna from where is that? Along the Minnesota-Wisconsin River there. I'll think of it in a minute. The memory is going. But anyway, Catholic Charities was in charge, and they sent out kind of an appeal. Would there be some sisters that would be willing to volunteer to do this? Okay, part of this, many of the sisters are aging, as you mentioned, Tom, and sometimes in early retirement.
I didn't say anything about aging, sister. I just said dwindling.
But at any rate, when you're between retirement and when you've worked all these years, it's kind of like, am I sitting here? Could I do something else? So there were 4 sisters here from St. Benedict's that volunteered. Well, it was just really, for a while, we were told there were 4 sites in Texas, Laredo and Brownsville and McAllen, and then up in El Paso. And they said, back and forth, oh, they didn't need help. Yes, they did need help. But then we were told that Laredo was the poorest diocese in Texas, and they needed help more than anybody. So that's where we decided to go. So we drove down there, and believe me, the ministry is not that hard. There wasn't that much to do. 2 of the 4 of us spoke some Spanish. I consider myself bilingual, and the other sister spoke some Spanish, but she'd like me to be beside her if there was anything important. But at any rate, what do you do when you go down there? You wait until a bus load of people, usually there'd be 35 or 40 at a time, that would be delivered to which was our center. Actually, it was a building owned by Catholic Charities. It had formerly been kind of a home gathering for people, for the elderly. So there were all kinds of statues all over the place, artificial flowers, things like that. So there were times we really had to push things aside and do what we needed to do. But there was always a room, you need a room where there's used clothing that has been washed. One of the biggest jobs is to size that clothing, to sort it, to be there. When people come from the border, most of the time they haven't had a chance to shower for quite some time. They want to shower, they want to clean up, they want to change clothes. Most of the time we were able to get people in contact with their sponsors here in the States, who is often a relative or a friend who is vouching that they will pay their ticket from where we were from, Laredo, to wherever they were going to be hosted. So first thing we had to do, and this was amazing to me, every single person that came was in a family, and they always had a cell phone. Now people say, where in the devil? Well, they needed that was their only contact back home and with future sponsor. They know how to use a cell phone better than I do at times. But what was necessary is to calm them down, give them a drink, give them something to eat if they need it, then contact their sponsor. Tell the sponsor, you need to tell us, how is this family going to get from here in Laredo, Texas, to wherever you're going? By bus, by plane, whatever is it? Or are you close enough that you'll come and pick them up? So we needed always a confirmation number for the bus ticket or the airplane. Now, just lately you heard, unfortunately, that the border guard simply took 2 or 3 busloads of people, that would be about 80 people, and dumped them at the bus depot, and that was in McAllen, Texas. They didn't have that intermediate moment that we tried to supply. Calm down, we're here, have a drink of water. We do not belong to the government in any way. Can we help you? Contact your sponsors. They were dumped at the depot, so the people at the depot were not prepared to speak Spanish, to help people that were coming off a real crisis situation. So that was unfortunate. So we tried to give them this pause where they could be. And sometimes beautiful things would happen, sometimes tragic things would happen. I would have to say, in the month I was there, I only took off 1 day. I was there at least 3 or 4 hours, sometimes more. Sometimes it was very easy to do. For some reason, many of the sisters that were there did not like to cook. So at least 5 or 6 times, I got to cook noon lunch for 40 people. And my highest success was something I called refrigerator soup. I started out with a good chicken broth, and I did all the leftovers. And people said, oh, this was wonderful, wonderful. Can you give me the recipe? Oh, this can never be repeated, never to be repeated. So, but often what happened, whatever I would be doing, I would often be interrupted, come translate. I want to tell you a couple of heartbreaking things that did happen. One day I was called by the fellow that kind of did maintenance around, and he said, come quick. This woman wants you to come and translate in the clothing room. Well, now I never felt it was too much my job to say, how are you? How did it go on your trip? I did not want to be intrusive. I felt it was important to say, hello, how are you? I'm happy you're here. How can I help you? Would you like a
More in
bottle?
this moment, not in that moment.
Yes. Well, this other woman that was there, Rainey, was a journalist, and she really was trying to write the story of. So she knew very little Spanish, but she knew enough through this maintenance man to say, how was your trip? Well, the woman, and her name was, I'll never forget, her name was Nayeli. Nayeli said to Rainey, this journalist, she said, in as best she could, she explained, well, she said it was not good. I was robbed, I was raped, and I was left in the woods. So Rainey called the man, go and get Sister Judy. So I went in there and I talked a little bit to Yaneli. She didn't care to talk too much about it. She did cry and she said that's what had happened. Well, there was nothing else to do, but the three of us locked arms. And I said, you know, Yaneli, all the women of the world were insulted when you were insulted. We are all sisters. We are women of the human. Thank God I had some holy water in my purse. So I quick went to get my holy. I anointed Yaneli, and I also anointed Rainey. And then I turned to Yaneli and I said, Yaneli, will you anoint me with holy water on the forehead? So we stood and prayed for a while. And then Yaneli finally said, can we pray the Our Father? She said in Spanish, because she would know that. I spoke in Spanish, of course. I made up a prayer as we went along, but I tried to talk about the dignity of women and motherhood and what violation meant to all of us. So I think we all cried for a minute. So that was a very hard moment. Sure. And after this, I don't know exactly what Rainey did, but she wanted to write up something. So we did our prayer there. Then,
where had this woman's journey begun? Where was she from?
Guatemala. Many of them from Guatemala. That's where she was from.
Yeah. So could you start a little bit more on that in terms of, I think the border, the whole immigration border thing is just something that so many of us struggle to understand from beginning to end and what to do. Well, when I went to Douglas in 2017, it was the situation there, Judy, was very similar. You know, Sister Lucy Nye, school sister of Notre Dame from Milwaukee, or from Southwest Wisconsin originally. And she was part of a community of different sisters from the United States who had answered a similar call to come and be of service in this area. But I told her when I got there, I said, Lucy, my goal here is to understand the border before I leave. And she said, Tom, it's going to be more confusing. Your head's going to be more messed up than it was when you got here. I guess just tell us why did the woman you talked to, why do they, I mean, I guess we know, I have some idea why they come here, but help others who struggle with whether we should allow them in and what should happen when they get here. And
the United States guidelines for admitting someone have not been updated since the Second World War. And I recall during the Second World War, we always used to refer to DPs, displaced persons. Now, this is the big cry that when we had the meeting and the bishop from Laredo was there, he said, we have to realize the border is everywhere. All over the world, nations and people are migrating. Many of them are what we call economic kinds of people, economic immigrants that are looking for a better life, most of our relatives, my relatives came from Germany looking for a better life. But one of the things my grandpa had, and he was from Germany, he had two brothers that had been killed in the war, and he did not want to have to be drafted. That was part of his reason for coming over. He did not want war. But many of them came as, we would call them, economic immigrants, looking for a better life. The world of the country of opportunity. Go west, young man. Come and homestead here. We want people. Well, we're getting back to that. When you read some of the figures about population in the United States, there are more people dying than being born. What does that mean? The population is, we need the immigrants with larger families to do, we need the plumbers, we need the electricians, we need the mechanics, we need people to do that, as well as And aren't you proud? I can't help but say this. Wisconsin and Minnesota welcomed, we were the greatest place in welcoming the Hmong peoples. And look at, we have a Hmong American from Minnesota, from the Twin Cities, getting a gold medal in gymnastics. I would say the Hmong people have proven themselves.
There are a few Hmong people in Wausau who are proud of that too.
And I think, can we not expect that from the next generation of people? Right now, we have huge groups of Somalis here in St. Cloud. The largest group of Somalis are here. They are not Christian, but they are the women right now. I volunteer at the hospital. They are the women who are doing the cleaning. They are the women who are beginning to be in our nursing home. We have at least 8 Somali women that are, LPNs, that sort of thing, but they're doing nursing work. And most of them are going to night school as well. So they want to better themselves. So we have these economic kinds of immigrants. We have other immigrants who are fleeing danger, like Yaneli was. She was fleeing danger. She knew she was in danger with the gangs around in Guatemala. They're fleeing great injustice politically. The government has taken over any little plot of land that they had, so that they do not have anything that would be their private kind of farming or whatever it is. And they are fleeing conditions of instability. I also would say they are refugees from the situation of the earth warming. Crops that used to grow there no longer grow there. Their land is simply, there's nothing they can do. So that they are, yes, they're partly economic immigrants, but what we're told, this just broke my heart, and this came right from Bishop from El Paso. 50% of the people that do come to our units that we had there will be sent back. 40% will go underground. 10% will be legally admitted to stay. Those who have a lawyer have a better chance of staying. But how many lawyers can you get to do that kind of thing? So it's the immigration situation. And Bishop Sight said, the Bishop from El Paso, we need a new name for these immigrants. Are they immigrants? Are they refugees? Or are they displaced persons? Or do we need to find, that might be a good question for your parish to ponder. What name can we give these peoples? He also said we need to do 3 things. We need to welcome them, we need to receive them, and we need to accompany them. Those 3 things. These were his words. And then I asked at one of the meetings, the woman who was kind of our boss in Laredo was invited to speak to the meeting that they had in the very beginning of June in Mundelein, and she came back totally thrilled with the college and the seminary there. She had been there. She's beautiful. But her message was somehow or another to these people, what do we say to them? Why do we want to welcome them to the United States? And her answer was, we want them to be informed, active citizens who will vote, who will participate in a democracy. And I thought, what an interesting thing. This is what the end product we wish of these people, fully integrated and participating in a voting democracy. I thought how lovely that is, but how far away is that?
Well, in the meantime, we worry that they are illegal, that they don't belong here, that they will cost us too much in terms of.
Tom, is there such a thing as an illegal person? Please tell me what would be an illegal person. An illegal person would be a person not created by God. That term.
I guess it would be someone who our laws do not accept as allowing to be living in our country. I'm kind of speaking at how others might perceive this.
Well, and that's why the Native American thing right now, to whom does the land belong? And these are all other things that get very much spread out in all of this. But there is a papal commission trying to work on this whole problem. But unfortunately, now Tom, correct me if I'm wrong on this, clergy abuse, the whole thing about misbehavior of people, and now all of a sudden we're going off on to study the Eucharist. All of this blurs, and we forget about the whole problem of the nations of the world that are moving. Where are they moving? They're moving into Northern Europe, all over, and they have all kinds of laws there. They're restricting them. They want them. They don't want them. And above all, there's the big problem. Can we admit people who are not Christians? The Somalis here coming to the St. Cloud Diocese are not Christians. Can we have a dialogue with them? Can we welcome them? Would we dare give them food and clothing? This is, and it's a worldwide problem. This is why, I don't know, we continue that, Bishop Seitz continued to say, There is no such thing as a border. We're all the border. We belong in this together. And above all, when we see the whole thing about our earth warming up, we're seeing things, the weather that we can't explain. We've never had this before. The fires, the floods.
Well, the drought, you've had this drought all summer.
Terrible, just terrible. And let me tell you one more, you interrupt me if you want to, but this was another moment that I just cringed. There was another man, Denny was his name, and he had come to the center that I was at in Laredo, and he was there for almost 2 weeks, which is most unusual. Most of the time we get them set up, they get something to eat, get them their lunch, and get them on their way on a bus to their sponsors, hoping they get there. And we take them to the depot or the airport physically, and physically see that they get on the right buses, because sometimes that's very confusing.
Now, is Border Patrol part of any of this, Judy?
Yeah, we come from Border Patrol.
Okay, so they've gone, these are not people that Border Patrol would be looking for, or?
Border Patrol has their name, their fingerprints. They are no longer shackled with an ankle bracelet. When I was in El Paso, they had ankle bracelets on. Yes, they did. And they were told that they ran they had to plug in the battery. And if that would go dead, they were in trouble. That was frightening. That was frightening. But I must tell you Denny's story first. Yeah. Denny was waiting he had his 13-year-old son with him. He had been separated from his wife and his 2 adult children. Both of the boys were like 19 and 20, so they were sent to another camp. So Denny was waiting at our camp in Laredo, hoping they would be sent there within the next week. Every day he'd wait for the bus and wait for his wife or his 2 children. They didn't come. But he said, I want to be useful. So he washed most of the sheets, and he would fold them with his son and do. So he was most helpful. But one day he was sitting there and he noticed there was a whole line of cars going in front of the place where we were sitting, kind of waiting for the next bus load. And he said to me, what are those cars doing? And I said, well, Denny, they're getting commodities. I said, in most cities in the United States, if people are below the poverty level, they have to register with a social worker. They can get commodities once a month. And these people, every Wednesday, Really, he said. And he looked at me and he said something I will never forget. He said, that's why this country is great. You do what you say you're going to do. I thought, oh my God, Danny, I hope you are never disappointed. The world still sees us as a country which does what we say we're going to do. How long can we hang on to that? I don't know. Then I have to tell you a good joke on myself. There was another woman, we were down right across from the bridge 2 days after they lifted this Title 42, where they were beginning, and it was interesting. The border guard would come 2 in the front and 2 behind, and we never had more than 15 or 16 people coming, but they would walk them physically across the bridge, very friendly and very positive with us. The reason is, they said, look, there are people on both sides of the bridge who are watching these immigrants. They know they have money because they're going to buy a bus ticket. Mm-hmm. There have been kidnapping, there have been mugging. So we are bringing them over here. So please watch them carefully. Keep their children close to them. We even had 1 kidnapping. So the border guard, for our purposes, were very helpful. So this one woman was sitting in front of me. She was a mom. She had a new baby in her arms. She had 2 other little ones and her husband. When it was time for me to fill out all the paperwork, she sat up at the table and the husband sat back. Well, we could get them on the next bus, which was in 3 hours. So I told them, if you can give me this information, I can get you. And then I said to somebody beside me, can you get the food ready? Because they were going to be on the bus for at least 4 or 5 hours, lunch. And all of a sudden I looked at her and I looked at the baby and I said, what about formula for the baby? And I asked her in Spanish. And she pointed to her breast and smiled. And I said, oh my God, I'm a nun. What would I know about that? So that was one on me. I mean, she laughed heartily. And
also, as she's making this long journey from Guatemala, wherever, Judy, how is she going to be dealing with formula along the way, right?
Well, and I have this dumb question.
But imagine, so she's made this journey with a baby.
Sure. Yeah. We often had women who would ask for extra juice or extra milk so that they'd be all right. And I mean, that happened. That was part of it. But that was the joke on me. I did not translate for the rest of the team of English speaking there. I thought, that's none of your business. I'm not going to tell you how stupid.
That was between me and the mother. Yeah.
Right. Well, her husband heard it too. And the little boys just looked at us like, what's the matter with you? what are
You
things?
mentioned, so you were in two different places. Can
Mhm.
you talk to how the local church
Yes.
was different in those experiences, or the bishops in those places?
When I
I
was
don't
in
know
El
the Bishop of
Paso, when I
Laredo.
was in El Paso, the bishop was this Mark Stites, who is coming to the fore, beautifully speaking, for the people
Yes.
who are being, and he's heading up many of these committees. But
He's one of
when I-
those, he's one of the up and coming bishops in the United States, Bishop Sites. We'll be hearing a lot more of
He's a
him.
rather slight man, totally white, but he had the interesting thing. When I was in El Paso,
And a Wisconsin native. Let's get that out there
that's
too.
what yes, get that out there. And we're hoping to get, and a graduate of St. John's University
College.
and St. Johnsville School of Theology. So he is from our area, close to our hearts. But when I was this was interesting in El Paso, we had no way to prepare food. They came so rapidly that the man who was taking care simply would rent a section of rooms in a motel. So that was my work primarily for that month. So we had no way. But what happened, the businesses in the city of El Paso brought the meals in. And the interesting thing is, one of the nights I was so proud of the United States and this had to have been in late December, the university faculty from El Paso brought in a beautiful meal for 100 people. Chicken, rice, beans. We always had to have beans, and you always had to have rice, or they wouldn't know. And a dessert and fruit. They brought it in, and they spread it all out on this table. And I insisted on saying grace before we started. So I said something about prayer at that time. I was speaking in Spanish, but I said to the people that were gathered, I want you to know that this evening's meal is brought in by the faculty of the University of Laredo. I want you to know how important education is in our country. So please promise this faculty tonight that you will value education and you will see to it that you do your best, that your children are educated to the best of your ability. With that, they clapped. So I was very pleased. And faculty, they were dressed beautifully. They came as if that they were going to a dinner for themselves. And I was proud of the people that were there coming in, and I was proud of the faculty at that time.
Yeah.
Do we have time for another story?
Sure.
Okay.
You know what? If people don't want to keep watching TV, they'll just shut it off.
Really? Well, I have another story from the El Paso story. And this story both congratulates and blames the Border Patrol. To start with, as I say, we were in.
Oh, by the way, they have a horrible job.
They do.
So,
and they're doing what they're told to do.
Yeah.
And many times they take money out of their own pocket when there's someone very thirsty, someone needs something to eat. And the various refugees will tell you, yeah, they were very good to me. But this happened one day. The manager of the hotel that I was at came running in, and there were about 3 or 4 of us volunteers. And he said, I need somebody that speaks Spanish well. So everybody can look at me. Well, I went with him. And at the front door of the motel was a vehicle with darkened, what do you call that? With smoky windows. You couldn't see inside.
Oh, yeah.
And that always makes me suspicious. I have seen too many detective movies, I guess that's it. But anyway, that makes me suspicious. But the woman who got out of the front seat of this was in Border Patrol uniform. And yeah, I shouldn't say this, but her uniform was very tight on her. She was quite hefty. But and then she went around and opened the side door of the back. And a woman with a very tiny baby got out. And the Border Patrol woman said to me, this baby is only 3 days old, she said, but we don't have room for her, and we don't have what this woman needs. And she said, in fact, the blanket around that baby is our blanket. So with that, she pulled the blanket off the baby, who was dressed only with a diaper. So I took off my jacket. That's the best thing. And thank God it was a denim jacket. I took off my jacket and wrapped it around the baby. And we walked inside, and this woman left. And I thought, good Lord. Well, the mom's name was Angelina. I'll never forget it. Angelina came in, and I called the other 2. And I said, come here quick, look what we've got. Well, this was shortly before Christmas. And Angelina was there, and she began to cry, and she told us her story. She said, I was pregnant when I came here. And she said, and I knew it was time to deliver. And she said, the Border Patrol took me to the hospital. And she said, it was not a real difficult delivery. She said, my baby came and they put it in my arms. And she said, the next morning, The doctors and someone from the staff came in and said, we're going to need to take your baby because your baby is a citizen of the United States. It was born here. You are not a citizen. You have no claim on this baby. Well, she started to cry. She said, that's my baby. That's my child. And she said, within 10 minutes, Border Patrol representatives came in and they said, this baby goes with the mother. You cannot separate that baby and mother. So that's when they took the baby back to Border Control and brought him over to us. So Angelina was with us for about 10 days. We tried to get her on the plane. The plane doesn't take the baby until they're 2 weeks old. So we had her there. And I did manage to get a single room for her in the motel. But the interesting thing about, she had been there, it was less than a week. And there was, it was a company, it was a big box company. It was not pennies or anything like that, but it was a nice company. And they came one day with a picnic for everybody. It was kind of nice weather. They fed them all outside and they bought presents for the kids. So they had to have boxes with at least 25, 30, and they were all wrapped up.
Wow.
The presents had come. So
Yeah.
I went down with I had eaten, and then I thought, oh, Angelina's upstairs with me. So I took another paper plate on a tray, and I went down and I said to the people, I said, I have a new mom upstairs, so I need a plate of food for her. A new mom, a baby? Yeah, I said, her baby is about a week old. Really? Could we see the baby? And I said, you know what? I'll have her come down, and can you give me 10 minutes? And I'll get her downstairs. She's in her room upstairs. Okay. So we arranged that. And I brought Angelina down with the baby. And the rest of the immigrants that were there were wonderful cousins and uncles and grandmas and grannies. They would hold the baby. They would say, Angelina, can I hold the baby for 10 minutes so that she'd have a little rest? She was very generous. And nobody said anything about germs or anything. They were just cousins by the dozens and that the way. So I brought Angelina down, and about 8 people from that store, it wasn't pennies, but it was a little higher class, came in and they looked, oh, this is the baby. Oh, and they looked at, oh, how wonderful. Well, they cooed over the baby for a while and they left. But later that afternoon, they came back with gifts for the baby, a bassinet, baby clothes, rattles, a new gown, a new kind of a bed jacket for Angelina. They brought presents back and I thought if there ever were magi, this was it. Mm-hmm. They brought presents back for this little baby girl that was here. Eventually, Angelina, we did get her on a plane. And the sad part of this, you never know how they landed.
What happens?
You need to pray also, I always say, for the patrons, for the people that are going to receive them. They're probably themselves immigrant. So they, spread their house out, make another place at the table. They've got another noise. They've got another mouth to feed. And most of them are, they're very generous. But I always think, they're having a tough time of it as it is. So I often prayed for the receiving families.
Where you were, Judy, that was a chapter, a new chapter in the story, but so much of the story was yet to be told, right?
Yeah. And currently, organizations or my prior is here, it said, find out about adopting a family. That's no longer possible. You cannot adopt a family. So people say, well, what could I do? What could I do?
Right.
The interesting thing is many of the sisters that were down there, this one sister came from, well, I won't even mention the community, but she was the business manager for the community. And she said, I have been instructed. We did get stimulus checks in our community for the sisters. And she said, we are okay. So she said, I have been instructed to spend this entire stimulus check that came to our community on clothing and whatever is needed here for the migrants.
Well, technically, Judy, she spent that money on salaries and she used other money to do those things.
Probably. So she was seen to go.
I think it's how that's supposed to work.
She went to Walmart 3 different times, and each time spent over $1,000 on men's jeans, shoes, socks, and underwear. Nobody thinks to donate clean, new underwear for women, for men. And I'm sure they're just, naked in there, but things like that. But there are other people that donate things that are not needed. So I always say it's probably best to make a donation and say, purchase what you need at the moment. because that changes as well. Oh, and then the other thing, they want shoestrings and belts, because when they're in detention, they pull out all the shoestrings and belts. This could be a weapon. So the first thing, oh, could I get a belt? Well, whoever thought of that would be such a highly prized item? And do you have shoestrings? Yeah, we have shoestrings. Here you go.
Your idea, your thought of just donating money and then letting people at the site purchase what's needed is, I've learned that's so true, because I think over the years we took so much stuff to Haiti that really wasn't of any use to the people there.
Yeah. And here, well, like when we have a food drive, we have something all during Lent. The sisters are saving money. And then on Holy Thursday, they used to make a basket, go out and buy the food, and then present it on Holy Thursday. Well, I've always said to my living group, can we just collect our money and give it in a check or something like that to the local? We try to do that for the local food pantry. The local food, what do you need? Peanut butter? What do you need? Bread? Whatever. You buy it, and they can get a much better price. They buy it in bulk. They buy it as it comes through for Feed My People, one of those. But you don't get the joy of seeing, the jar of pickles or the can of coffee or whatever.
So is it feasible for someone, let's just say someone here at St. Anne's, who they could go and do what you did? Is it feasible for them to go?
Absolutely. You have to apply then. Right now, Catholic Charities. And I think that's good. They're a known group. They're throughout the United States. Rather loosely federated. I mean, they each have their own, but we kind of, Donna Markham is the name I was trying to remember.
Well, what I would do is, if someone's watching this and they think I'd be interested in learning more about doing what Sister Judy did, they can contact me, and then I could communicate with you and figure out how to.
Donna Markham is at the national office. She's a Cincinnati Dominican, but from there, she has a woman who takes care of all these, and then they'll feed you, kind of field you, not feed you, we hope that too, but they will field you. When they said that Laredo this year was the poorest, we said, okay, there are 4 of us, let's go there. I mean, we can support one another. So that's what we did. And it's hard, people say, I don't know, educate yourself first.
Right. Well, and I think that's the ongoing challenge, just to try to stay abreast of what's happening, try to understand go beyond the headlines into the complexities of the situation. It is political, it is controversial, but at the heart of it, it's about people, and it's about their dignity as children.
That's what Bishop Sides keeps saying.
Created in the
this is not a humanitarian. This is a humanitarian crisis, not a political crisis, and we've made it into a political crisis.
And just to remember, Jesus was a refugee at one time. He was a displaced person.
Yes, absolutely.
And as you mentioned, in collecting the fragments, Jesus was always attentive to the fragments. And I don't want to say that these folks who come across the border are fragments, but they're looking to be collected and protected. And thanks for helping to do that in your.
There was a little boy that. There was a little, I told you there were kind of strange statues all around this place from the older people that had been there. There was a little boy one day, we managed to find a right pair of jeans for him. And he looked up, and above him, there was a picture of the Good Shepherd. It was really kind of beat up and, scarred and that. And he looked up at it and he said, "That's God." And then he pointed to me and the 2 other sisters that were helping me. And you 3 are angels of God. I thought, I've never had a kinder kind of compliment than.
I think that's a good anecdote to end on, Sister Judy Kramer.
Okay.
Thank you for your ministry at the border, and thank you for all the ministry that you've offered over these many years, and especially here in the Diocese of La Crosse. Sister Judy was a director of our Office of Justice and Peace back in the day when we had an Office of Justice and Peace.
And back in the day when Tom Lindner was a seminarian, and John Parr came to me and said, "I have room for 1 seminarian to send him to Burkina Faso, and I have half of the money, but I need another $1,000 to be able to take care of this. Can you raise that, Judy?" And I said, "Yes." Do you know what I'll do? I'll do what we always do. I went to the women. I went to the DCCW of the diocese, and they gladly gave the additional money, so that it was not a real successful trip for you. I recall that, but you did have your eyes open to what was.
Au contraire.
Okay. Oh, all right.
It was a great trip. Oh my gosh. What do you remember?
I remember that you said there were some fair-haired boys from a couple of dioceses that did not.
Oh, well, you're always gonna have characters.
But
of
you knew that.
who are-
But there was,
Oh,
but you were the journalist. That's why John Parr wanted you to go. He said this would be the ideal one to go. And you were seminarian at that time, nearing the end of your studies, and he wanted to get you early in on some of this.
well, and the thing was, Judy, I didn't know anything about Catholic Relief Services at the time.
Okay.
Remarkably, I mean, it wasn't a thing in my parishes where I grew up or when I was in
Okay.
college or whatever. So it was also important. And the reason CRS did the Global Fellows Program, I talked about this actually, Judy, back in during the high school program, we interviewed on this quick things,
Okay.
two CRS staff people in Burkina Faso.
Okay, with CRS.
Yeah,
Good.
yeah. So, and the reason CRS did the Global Fellows Program was so that guys in the seminary would know about CRS, and when we're ordained, would be advocates of CRS. And so it worked. I have been an advocate of CRS wherever I've been.
Oh, I'm
And yes,
glad.
you're correct. Everything she said, all credit is due to Sister Judy Kramer and Father John Parr.
Yeah, John had half the
For that
women, and I had to
opportunity.
get, but I went to the women.
I mean, the idea was that we're going to go to Burkina Faso in Africa. And I mean, I had never heard of Burkina Faso.
Well, I know we all had to look on the
You
map.
had neither before that came up.
Yeah.
Yeah. So,
Yeah.
well, thank you, Sister Judy. And I guess we also, do you know who the patron saint of refugees would be?
There would be many.
I suppose there's always one who's identified. And I'd done a little research. It occurred to me while I was talking to
And
you.
what were you
a
doing?
good
Joseph? St.
saint
Joseph?
to call out to as we end our conversation. But we just, put before God all those folks. And some are crossing borders, and some are in cities just like Wausau or St. Joseph, Minnesota, who are desperately looking for some kind of compassion and companionship and dignity. And we just pray that we might share
And
that.
the other thing, encourage your students to study Spanish. That's something you can do that. And think of a title for these poor people. Are they displaced persons, or do they deserve another name? That would be a good, I'd be very eager to hear what title they might come up with.
I would too. So,
Yeah.
Sister Judy, God bless you and your continued ministry and your community. And thank you for being with us on this week's Quick Things. Saint Anne, pray for us.
Pray for us. Very good. Thank you, Tom.